Before we start Rambam bekius today, I just wanted to announce for anyone who's listening or watching that my new podcast is now officially launched, Machshava Lab. The Machshava Lab is a sort of a miscellaneous podcast. It's going to have all of my Friday Lamdeha sessions, seminars. It's going to have my YBT Sunday shiurim, and then it's going to have my weekly Chumash methodology shiurim, and then any other thing that is somewhat related to Jewish philosophy or methodology of arriving at your own, understanding and ideas of Torah. It's all going to go there, and maybe some other projects in the future. So just wanted to announce that, and link is in the description as always. All right, we'll start Rambam soon. All right, so we are continuing in our quest to understand the parameters of Maaseh Bereishis and Maaseh Merkavah according to the Rambam, and to understand what the nature is of the restrictions on how they're how they're taught and learned. And we yesterday did we skipped ahead and did the Rambam's preface to Chelek Gimel, where he's about to explain Maaseh Merkavah. But that was really premised on what we're about to read, which is about the limitations of the human intellect and why you shouldn't start with metaphysics. So roughly speaking, chapters 30, we're in Chelek Aleph of the Moreh Nevuchim, 31 and 32 is going to be about the limits of the intellect. And then 33 and 34 is going to be about why you can't start with these metaphysical topics. And we're going to be using the Shlomo Pines translation, but we're also going to supplement it with the Kafik translation. And then I just found that Yeshiva has a copy of the Schwartz translation. So if we need that, then we'll use it. All right, so know that the human intellect has objects of apprehension, that it is within its power and according to its nature to apprehend. Good. I'm glad we were learning this 30 chapters into the Moreh Nevuchim. On the other hand, in that which exists, there are also existence, that's existents. There are existence and matters that according to its nature, it is not capable of apprehending in any way or through any cause. The gates of their apprehension are shut before it. I was thinking about this point right before we started, and I guess I could make it afterwards, but I'm gonna make it now. It's like, people who are like anti-philosophy and anti rationality and stuff like that, I feel like they paint the Rambam as this uber rationalist and hyper rationalist. It's going to become very, very clear in these next 4 chapters that the Rambam clearly holds that there are limitations on what the intellect can grasp and warns accordingly. I mean, it's just like, anyone who tries to paint the Rambam as someone who holds that that everything is understandable by the human intellect. That's just not the Rambam's position, So just wanted to say that. Okay. There are also, in that which exists, things of which the intellect may apprehend one state while not being cognizant of other states. I'm not sure what he means by states here. Let's see. The fact that it apprehends does not entail the conclusion that it can apprehend all things, just as the senses have apprehensions, but it is not within their power to apprehend at whatever distance the objects of apprehension may happen to be. So in other words, I guess, connecting to the previous thing, just because you understand one aspect of something does not mean that that the thing is now in the category of the totally understandable. Don't think that. They're just like you can see, you can see stuff with your eyes. Doesn't mean that you can see, Mercury or Neptune or whatever. Whatever.
Like you can see part of the ocean with your eyes, but doesn't mean you
see
everything.
Exactly. Yeah, that's an interesting mistake, though, right? I mean, emotionally, that carries a lot of weight. The feeling that if something is completely beyond your comprehension, then it's much easier to accept the fact that this is a limit on your intellect. But if you understand part of something, it's very easy to say, well, this is in the category of things I can understand, and then to not make that distinction about where the limits are within that thing. Yeah. Similarly, with regard to all, there's one more resource I want to mention here, which I was just introduced to by Rabbi Yaakov Trachman indirectly, that I've used somewhat. I can't vouch for everything, but it has been very helpful. There's this site called, I don't know what it's called. Hold on. It's called Maimonides-guide.com or -guide.com. And it's basically, it's a commentary on each chapter of the Moreh Nevuchim in detail. It looks like it is all of Chelek Aleph, and then Chelek 2 is in progress, and Chelek 3 is yet to be written. But he goes through every single line in the Moreh Nevuchim in English, and like explains what he thinks, the Rambam's doing at every step. And then also what's useful about it is he, let's say like in the earlier chapters of the Rambam where he quotes the psukim to like explain certain terms, he'll look up all the psukim and try to explain why the Rambam is quoting those psukim to exemplify certain ideas. So it's a very useful resource. I really should actually add it to the show notes and all the stuff. Oh, I guess I didn't do that because it's not a Mishnah Torah resource, but whatever, I can still add it. Okay. Anyway, similarly, with regard to all other bodily faculties, for the fact that a man is able to carry 200 weights does not mean that he's able to carry 10. Okay, right. It's another good analogy. 1,000 weights, yeah. The difference in capacity existing between the individuals of the species with regard to every sensory apprehensions and all other bodily faculties is manifest and clear to all men. Meaning, of course, we know that there are physical differences and sensory differences. However, it has a limit in as much as these capacities cannot attain to every distance, however far away, nor to every degree, however great it may happen to be. What does that mean? There's a limit in as much as these capacities cannot attain, meaning that there's a certain range of your bodily capacities and sensory apprehensions. The identical rule obtains with regard to human intellectual apprehensions. Yeah, I mean, this is really coming down to the fact, it seems, that because our intellect is operating through a corporeal medium, through a body, then all the bodily limitations are going to affect the limitations of the intellect. If your intellect were not limited by body, like the malachim, then you wouldn't have these problems, or at least they wouldn't be of the same nature, because obviously the angels are also limited in their capacity to grasp. There are great differences in capacity between the individuals of the species. This is also manifest and very clear to men of knowledge. It may thus happen that whereas one individual discovers a certain notion by himself through his speculation, another individual is not able ever to understand that notion. Even if it were explained to him for a very long time by means of every sort of expression and parable, his mind would not penetrate to it in any way, but would turn back without understanding it.
You're saying there are people that are just not capable.
Yeah, and I mean, what he means here is not capable of understanding particular notions. I don't think it's true that there's some people not capable of understanding anything, but I think he means, he started off by saying a certain notion,
Right.
Like you might not ever be able to grasp, abstract, calculus or
right. But everybody could grasp, I feel like he's saying it's for certain people maybe out of your control to grasp certain things. So let's say you're born Jewish, but you're one of these people that it's just out of your control. You literally cannot grasp these abstract ideas or God or whatever. So then what? So then you're just
he's not saying so what. He's not saying so what. He's saying, he's just pointing out the phenomenon that there's some people have inherent limitations in terms of how far they can go. Let's see where he goes with it though. The difference in capacity is likewise not infinite, for man's intellect indubitably has a limit at which it stops. There are therefore things regarding which it has become clear to man that it is impossible to apprehend them, and he will not find that his soul longs for knowledge of them, inasmuch as he is aware of the impossibility of such knowledge and of there being no gate through which one might enter in order to attain it. So that's interesting. So he's saying there are things that are beyond your capacity to apprehend, and you don't have a desire to apprehend them. Now, desire is clearly not just straight up an indicator of whether you can or can't understand something. Like you might desire to understand certain things and it's beyond your capacity, or you might not have a desire for certain things and it is in your capacity. But this is saying that there are things that you don't desire because it's outside of your capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think in this context, he's saying it's once you know that it is impossible to know, then you don't desire it.
Let me read that again and see. There are things, therefore, regarding which it has become clear to man that it is impossible to apprehend them, and he will not find their soul longs for them, inasmuch as he is aware. Yeah, you're right. Right. What were you going to say, Isaac? Okay. Of this nature is our ignorance of the number of stars of heaven and whether that number is even or odd, as well as our ignorance of the number of the species of living beings, minerals, plants, and other similar things. That's an interesting example, right? Because it's not like you lack the capacity to have that piece of information. It's just that you can't obtain it. So it's out of your reach, practically. And therefore no one has a desire to know how many stars there are. That is interesting.
Right, but if we had a vehicle that could somehow take us then from a practical standpoint, our brain should be able to process how many stars there are.
Right. And you have cases like this where the thing was the knowledge was cracked. Like, let's say, for example, people at a certain point, it would have been unthinkable to measure the Earth or to measure the distance between the Earth and the Moon. And so people might not have desired it, but then one guy comes along and says, "No, I think I know how to do it," and then like does it, and then it's just that. See, I did not expect him to go to that example. I expected him to say stuff, because what I'm thinking when we were reading this is like knowledge of metaphysics.
Right.
Like I want to know like how God interacts with angels, or I want to know like what it means for God to create the universe in an act of will, or how can He create time? But and the problem in my mind was like, well, those are things that are impossible for us to know, but people desire to know them. People definitely want to know that stuff. That's that's what draws people to Maaseh Bereishis, Maaseh Merkavah. So like this is just a curveball here. I'm curious to see what he's going to say about this.
People that desire it are the people that think that they can attain.
Yes, that's also true.
Once you understand that it is impossible, this knowledge is not attainable for me.
Yeah.
Then you don't desire it anymore.
Theoretically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, and it's also a slippery argument in the sense that like you can say, well, here's a guy who knows that it's impossible and he still wants it, and then someone can say, well, because he doesn't really know. It's. Right. It sounds very good in abstract, but like in the particulars, it's hard. Like, let's say, for example,
not to say, like, I don't think I lack the desire to understand how God created the universe, how time and God works, but I know I can't get that knowledge.
Right.
But I still want to know it.
Yeah. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Like the person who's like firmly embraced the Rambam's principle would just say, well, then it's not real to you, and maybe that's the case, but then that kind of like dilutes the firmness of his principle here. Like Moshe Rabbeinu also had to warn people at Har Sinai not to break forward in order to see, to apprehend Hashem, or they'll die. And like that was even like there was like live intimidation in terms of like the boundaries around Har Sinai and stuff, and they still wanted that. So
I think this taking it like a step too, like maybe a step too far, which is I think he's saying there are certain types of knowledge that this phenomenon happens, and when a person sees that they can't know it, then they don't have any interest.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think he's saying that that's true of every knowledge.
No, I don't think he is either. But that's what I'm saying is like, well, where's he going with this then? Like, because this is not gonna. I mean, I guess we'll see. But like, I'm just verbally expressing the Rambam took a different path than I thought he was going to take, and I don't know why he's doing it, because it seems like this is not the area that we're talking about. So let's see what he does do with it. On the other hand, there are things for which the apprehension of which man will find that he has a great longing. The sway of the intellect endeavoring to seek for and to investigate their true reality exists at every time and in every group of men engaged in speculation. With regard to such things, there's a multiplicity of opinions. Disagreement arises between the men engaged in speculation, and doubts crop up. All this because the intellect is attached to an apprehension of these things. I mean to say, because of its longing for them, and also because everyone thinks that he has found a way by means of which he will know the true reality of the matter. So it's two things. It's you want to know and you think you can know, or you think you haven't found a way to know. Now, it is not within the power of the human intellect to give a demonstration of these matters. For in all things whose true reality is known through demonstration, there's no tug of war. I don't know what the Rambam actually used there. Did they have tug of war back then? I guess theoretically they could have. For in all things whose true reality is known through demonstration, there is no tug of war and no refusal to accept a thing proven, unless indeed such refusal comes from an ignoramus who offers a resistance that is called resistance to demonstration. Thus, you can find groups of people who dispute the doctrine that the earth is spherical. Oh, flat earthers were around in his time too. And that the sphere has a circular motion. And with regard to other matters of this kind, these folk do not enter into our purpose. Okay, just ignore those guys. The thing about which there is perplexity, there's this perplexity are very numerous in divine matters, few in matters pertaining to natural science, and non-existent in matters pertaining to mathematics. That's funny. Yeah.
Just quickly about that, the very last clause. I mean, at least nowadays that's not true.
Yeah, nowadays that's not right. Mathematics is very different now than the Rambam in the
Yeah.
Rambam's time.
So that they like people really want to know a way to factor prime numbers.
Hmm.
And it's possible that that does not exist the way.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I think when the Rambam was talking about mathematics, I think he's like, I think picture Euclid's geometry as like the paradigm of that, and that's different than like math research.
Question.
Yeah.
Would you say that this like desire for knowledge and like knowing that you can't achieve it or things like that, does that apply to only to like conclusions or to like proofs also? Like I really want a proof.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sounds like from here he is talking about conclusions about like the knowledge itself, but maybe I don't know. It's a good question, right? Because I mean, in a sense, like not wanting a proof for something is just wanting greater knowledge of it. You know, it's just it's a deeper level of knowledge. Yeah. I would extend that to proof as well. I think just given this phenomenon, it sounds like it. Okay, Alexander of Aphrodisias. That's the guy who people don't like, right?
I don't know.
I think. Anyone know who he is? Was he the one who like wrote a Torah commentary that took a bunch of stuff non-literally? Sounds familiar. All right, I'll have to look him up and see. Alexander of Aphrodisias says that there are 3 causes of disagreement about things. One of them is love of domination and love of strife, both of which turn man aside from the apprehension of truth as it is. The second cause is the subtlety and obscurity of the object of apprehension in itself and the difficulty of apprehending it. And the third cause is the ignorance of him who apprehends and his inability to grasp things that it is possible to apprehend. So,
even 3?
I was just going to try to figure that out, right? So number 1's clear, is some psychological drive that will lead to machlokas, right? I want to be right. I want to win. I want to be famous for this opinion.
It sounds like worldly content.
Yeah. The second cause is the fact that it's hard to understand, and therefore you're gonna have disagreement, right? So that's like a lot of philosophical machlokas is on that, or is because of that. And the third one is the ignorance of him who apprehends and his inability to grasp that it is impossible to apprehend. So that seems to be like a failure to recognize the limits of your intellect.
He's understanding it, but you're not really understanding it.
Yeah, or you think it's within the realm of capability, and it's not, either intrinsically or because of your own personal qualities. Like that's beyond the reach of your mind. Yeah. This is what Alexander mentioned. That is what Alexander mentioned. However, in our times, there is a 4th cause that he did not mention because it did not exist among them. Really, it is habit and upbringing. What? Didn't have habit and upbringing back then?
Yeah.
Man. I don't know whether it be envious or happy. You know.
It almost sounds like it could be rhetorical.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, he doesn't mean all habits and upbringing. He means like in terms of. I gotta look at this Alexander of Aphrodisias person. Just.
Yeah, but saying that did not exist among them. It could be.
Yeah.
Like,
It wasn't prominent or something.
No, I'm saying it could be like he's saying it rhetorically, like oh, it didn't exist among them, so I didn't want to. Really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So he looks like so Alexander of Aphrodisias was a peripatetic philosopher and the most celebrated of the ancient Greek commentators on the writings of Aristotle. He's from 150 to 215, so around Yudah Hanasi-ish time. He wrote many commentaries on the works of Aristotle, blah, blah, blah. Did he? Yeah, hold on. Yeah, all right, fine. So he was a philosopher. Okay. Anyway, all right, fine. So back to the thingy. So habit and upbringing. For man has in his nature a love of and an inclination for that to which he is habituated. Thus you can see that the people of the desert, notwithstanding the disorderliness of their life, the lack of pleasures and the scarcity of food, dislike the towns, do not hanker after their pleasures, and prefer the bad circumstances to which they are accustomed to good ones to which they are not accustomed. Right. Yeah. He's going to give examples. Their souls accordingly would find no repose in living in palaces, in wearing silk clothes, and in the enjoyment of baths, ointments, and perfumes. In a similar way, man has a love for and the wish to defend opinions to which he is habituated and in which he has been brought up, and has a feeling of repulsion for opinions other than those. Okay, this is a one I got to highlight in my Rambam at home. For this reason, also man is blind to the apprehension of the true realities and inclines towards the things to which he is habituated. See, this is something, by the way, that the Rambam when we did the Rambam on Emunah, on the definition of itikad, talked about explicitly. He said, when he says what the true definition of Emunah is, he says, renounce desires and habits and follow your reason. And so the desires being the I don't know what he means by desires in that case, and I also have to see like what the Hebrew translation has, but like either that influencing your mind because you want it to be the case, or just because you're used to something being the case. And I think it's interesting because like habit, it is a desire, but it's not like a positive desire that you like it because it's good. It's what you're used to. Like this desert dweller, I'm sure he likes the smell of perfume, but it's just so foreign to his habits of luxury that he's just, repelled by it. Yeah. So for this reason, a man is blind. For this reason, also man is blind to the apprehensions of the true realities and inclines toward the things to which he is habituated. This happened to the multitude with regard to the belief in his corporeality and many other metaphysical subjects, as we shall make clear. I'll say.
So, what's he referring to? Given this happened.
Meaning the fact that the multitude had was habituated to the notion of thinking of God physically, and then that like prevented them from rejecting corporeal notions of God. All this is due to people being habituated to and brought up on texts that it is an established usage to think highly of and to regard as true, and whose external meaning is indicative of the corporeality of God and of other imaginings with no truth in them. For these have been set forth as parables and riddles. This is so for reasons that I shall mention further on. Is he talking about Torah there?
I think so.
Right? Meaning like the external sense of Torah accustoms you to thinking of God in physical ways. Let me just see. It's going to take me too long. Let me just quickly look at the kafach here. Kin ira la'adam b'hashkafas asher hurgo lahem v'nischanach b'hem shehu mechabavan u'magin alehem misrachik mizulasim v'gam min hagorm hazem me'avir gorm zem me'avir es adam mihasagas ha'emes v'yate klape hergelav k'mosh ira lahamon b'gashmus u'vinyanim helukim rabim k'fish nishbar kol zem machmas ha'hergel v'achinach al lashonos shall kol modim b'kedushasan Vamitasan. He's got to be talking about Torah, right? That these people, all this is because of the expressions which everyone acknowledges their kedusha and truth. Asher pishtehen morim al gashmus al dimyonos bilti nechonos val nomru al derech hamashal v'chida. Yeah, I think he's talking about Torah.
The surface reading sounds like it's a physical thing.
Yeah.
But really, it's parables and riddles.
Yes. Okay. Do not think that what we have said with regard to the insufficiency of the human intellect and its having a limit at which it stops is a statement made in order to conform to law. By the way, I think this is just PSA, but anytime it says law here, it means Torah, right? Okay. So he's basically saying, don't think that we're doing apologetics. Don't think that we're just saying like, oh, you can't understand everything, that's just made in order to satisfy Torah. And the only reason we're saying it is because of Torah. For it is something that has already been said and truly grasped by the philosophers without their having concern for a particular doctrine or opinion. As even the guys who aren't beholden to anything. And it is a true thing that cannot be doubted except by an individual ignorant of what has already been demonstrated. We have put this chapter before others only with a view to it serving as an introduction to that which will come after it. Okay. All right. So that was fairly smooth sailing, I think. Okay, next chapter. Okay, you who study my treatise know that something similar to what happens to sensory apprehensions happens likewise to intellectual apprehensions insofar as they are attached to matter. A famous mashal coming up. For when you see with your eye, you apprehend something that is within the power of your sight to apprehend. If, however, your eyes were forced to do something that they are reluctant to do, if they are made to gaze fixedly and are set the task of looking over a great distance, too great for you to see, or if you contemplate very minute writing or a minute drawing that is not within your power to apprehend, and if you force your eye in spite of its reluctance to find out the true reality of the thing, your eye shall not only be too weak to apprehend that which you are unable to apprehend, but also too weak to apprehend that which is within your power to apprehend. Your eye shall grow tired, and you shall not be able to apprehend what you could apprehend before having gazed fixedly and before having been given this task. Yeah, so you strain your your faculty of sense, and then that ruins it. A similar discovery is made by everyone engaging in the speculative study of some science with respect to his state of reflection. So similarly, in areas of science, he says, for if he applies himself to reflection and sets himself a task demanding his entire attention, he becomes dull and does not understand even that which is within his scope to understand.
Wait, what exactly is he saying?
Yeah, I thought he was going to go in a different direction.
He's talking about like literal reflection, like looking at yourself in the mirror.
No. I think he's talking about reflection in speculative study,
Okay.
like reflecting on ideas. But he's saying that you're going to be, if you have too fixed a focus in your study, that'll dull your mind and not be able to understand what's in your scope. I mean, the thing I first jumped to here, which I don't think is like the best example of what he's saying, is like if you're working on writing something and like you get so, or sometimes I guess when you're working on investigating and figuring something out, there becomes a point where you've been so focused on this stuff that you can no longer think straight, and you can't work it out. And then even stuff that you should be able to grasp, you can't see clearly anymore, and people do this all the time with like scientists or doctors or whatever, like they'll go to a colleague and like, can you just like check this data and see if I'm missing anything? I've been thinking about it too long. I can't I can't see straight anymore, I think that's what he's talking about.
So when he says and sets himself a task demanding his entire attention, he's referring to the task of reflecting, not that he's reflecting and then does another task.
Right. Yeah, the task of reflecting. For the condition of all bodily faculties is in this respect one and the same. Something similar can happen to you with regard to your intellectual apprehensions. Okay, so we had sensory apprehensions, then we had speculation, and now he's saying intellectual apprehensions. For if you stay your progress because of a dubious point, if you do not deceive yourself into believing that there is a demonstration with regard to matters that have not been demonstrated, if you do not hasten to reject and categorically to pronounce false any assertions whose contradictories have not been demonstrated, if finally you do not aspire to apprehend that which you are unable to apprehend, you will have achieved human perfection and attained the rank of Rabbi Akiva, peace be upon him, who entered in peace and went out in peace when engaged in theoretical study of these metaphysical matters. I want to go back and read that after we read the contrast. If, on the other hand, you aspire to apprehend things that are beyond your apprehension, or you hasten to pronounce false assertions, the contradictories of which have not been demonstrated or that are possible, though very remotely so, you will have joined Elisha Acher. That's the wrong one. It was the heretic. That is, you will not only not be perfect, but will be the most deficient among the deficient. And it shall so fall out that you will be overcome by imaginings and by an inclination toward things defective, evil, and wicked, this resulting from the intellect's being preoccupied and its light being extinguished. In a similar way, various species of delusive imaginings are produced in the sense of sight when the vital spirit is weakened, as in the case of sick people and such as persist looking at brilliant or minute objects. So he's talking about like hallucinations. That's interesting. So let's go through that one more time.
Really understood.
Yeah. So he's saying in intellectual apprehensions, I think it's easier to start with the good list. If, on the other hand, you aspire to apprehend things that are beyond your sorry, that's not the good list. The bad list, I meant. Sorry, I meant to say the bad list. If you aspire to apprehend things that are beyond your apprehension, okay, that part's clear.
Right.
Or hasten to pronounce false assertions, the contradictories of which have not been demonstrated or that are possible. Meaning, if you're very quick to rule out possibilities, either without proof or just whatever, then those are the two bad things. Okay, now let's look at the good list. If you stay your progress because of a dubious point, meaning you're in doubt, and so you say, okay, I'm gonna think about this and keep putting. I'm gonna stay here. If you stay your progress, meaning if you don't go forward, because until you have it clear, yeah. Second, if you do not deceive yourself into believing that there is a demonstration with regard to matters that have not been demonstrated, meaning don't fake yourself out into thinking that you've proven something or demonstrated something. 3, if you do not hasten to reject and categorically to pronounce false any assertions whose contradictories have not been demonstrated, meaning that you reject, if you do not, the double negative is confusing me here. Right, meaning that
you don't throw out possibilities prematurely.
Yeah. And if finally you do not aspire to apprehend that which you are unable to apprehend, right? You don't go beyond your reach. So then that's the level of Rabbi Akiva. Okay, fine. And then he said at the end, when you talk about Elisha Acher, you're gonna have, he says, just like a person whose vital spirit is weakened, meaning you're sick, then you'll start to hallucinate in your sight. So too, he's saying that there will be like intellectual hallucinations that come about when your intellect is too strained and its light has been extinguished.
Mhm.
Yeah, what is it?
It's interesting that by Rabbi Akiva, he says it's human perfection. It's not just like, you'll be able to think clearly.
Yeah,
it's human perfection.
that's true. Right. Meaning, are you saying meaning like beyond just the mind, meaning like his mitos also?
Yeah. Like it seems like this has to do with like your whole, like whatever.
Yeah, that's going to become very clear in the next chapter or two when he talks about the requirements. Yeah. Okay. In this regard, it is said, this is Mishlei, hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomited. In a similar way, the sages, may their memory be blessed, use this verse as a parable that they apply to Elisha Acher. How marvelous is this parable, inasmuch as it likens knowledge to eating, a meaning about which we have spoken. It also mentions the most delicious of foods, namely honey. Now, according to its nature, honey, if eaten to excess, upsets the stomach and causes vomiting. Accordingly, the scripture says, as it were, that in spite of its sublimity, greatness, and what it has of perfection, the nature of the apprehension in question, if not made to stop at its proper limit and not conducted with circumspection, may be perverted into a defect, just as the eating of honey may. For whereas the individual eating in moderation is nourished and takes pleasure in it, it all goes if there's too much of it, meaning you vomit it if there's too much of it. Accordingly, scripture does not say, lest thou be filled therewith and loathe it, but rather says, and vomit it. This notion is also referred to in scripture in the dictum, it is not good to eat much honey, and so on, as well as in the dictum, neither make thyself overwise, why shouldst thou destroy thyself? It is likewise referred to in the dictum, guard thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and so on. This is referred to by David in the dictum, neither do I exercise myself in things too great or in things too marvelous for me. By the way, in that commentary I mentioned the Maimonides guide thing. So he'll go and take each of these psukim and see what nuances the Rambam bringing out in each of these, but this is Rambam bekius here. So the sages too intended to express this notion in their dictum, do not inquire about things that are too marvelous for you, do not investigate what is hidden from you, inquire into the things that are permitted to you, you have no business with marvels. That's the quote that the Ramban ends his Hakdama to Chumash with when he warns you not to think about his secrets of Torah unless you're an initiated Makubal. This means that you should not let your intellect move about only within the domain of things that man is able to grasp. For in regard to matters that it is...
Should let your... You said you should not.
Oh, this means that you should let your intellect move about only within the domain of things that man is able to grasp. Thank you. For in regard to matters that it is not in the nature of man to grasp, it is, as we've made clear, very harmful to occupy oneself with them. This is what, before we go on, so the honey thing is a good mashal, right? Because he's saying that it's not like the knowledge is bad.
It's just not there.
It's just you've overwrought your capacity to enjoy it, and it's going to make you sick.
You're left with like nothing.
Yeah.
Like you throw up everything, and you're just like left with zero.
Right, exactly.
Like you're just utterly confused and like, what is knowledge?
Yeah. This is what the sages intended to signify by their dictum. Whoever considers four things, that's the mission of Chagi we did, and so on, completing the dictum by saying, he who does not have regard for the honor of his creator, whereby they indicated that what we've already made clear, namely, that man should not press forward to engage in speculative study of corrupt imaginings. That was exactly like the way the Rambam expressed in Bereishis Mishnayos. When points appearing as dubious occur to him, or the thing he seeks does not seem to him to be demonstrated, he should not deny and reject it, hastening to pronounce it as false, but rather he should persevere and thereby have regard for the honor of his creator. So that's the crossroads that he said the Pesi, the gullible simpleton, will see these things being led by his imagination. It will seem false and he'll reject it as false, even though it really is true. But the Rabbi Akiva will say, okay, seems false, but I have to work through all the possibilities, make sure I understand it, and see if my imagination is like going haywire, And okay, right. He should refrain and hold back. This matter has already become clear. The intention of these texts set down by the prophets and the sages, may their memory be blessed, is not, however, wholly, WHOLY, to close the gate of speculation and to deprive the intellect of the apprehension of things that it is possible to apprehend, as is thought by the ignorant and neglectful, who are pleased to regard their own deficiency and stupidity as perfection and wisdom, and the perfection and the knowledge of others as a deficiency and a defection from the law, and who thus regard darkness as light and light as darkness. Their purpose in its entirety, rather, is to make it known that the intellects of human beings have a limit at which they stop. So in other words, he's saying, who are these, what's his critique of these people here?
Well, they just mix everything up. They're doing it opposite. They think that they're right and everyone else is wrong, and really, it's the opposite. But really, I think they're thinking with their ego, meaning you need to be able to step back and look at something through a lens of intellectual honesty and like, I don't know. And so what is it?
So what you're saying is true. And especially the thinking with the ego part, but I think he's making a more specific charge against these people. Let me just read that again. With the intention of these texts set down by the prophets and the sages, may the memory be blessed, is not, however, to wholly close the gate of speculation and deprive the intellect of the apprehension of things that it is possible to apprehend, as is thought by the ignorant and neglectful. Okay, meaning they think that the reason why Chazal said don't think about these things is because it is impossible to know these things. Right? Who are pleased to regard their own deficiency and stupidity as perfection and wisdom, and the perfection and the knowledge of others as a deficiency and a defection from the Torah, and who thus regard darkness as light. So what is the mistake these people are making?
They're saying you're not supposed to try to think about things.
Right. And what's the cause of that? Of them saying this?
Their own deficiency and stupidity.
Yeah. So that's where the ego comes in. Okay. Yes, but yes, in a different way.
They're taking their own lack of knowledge as a virtue.
Yeah, they're saying basically, I can't understand that stuff. Therefore, when Chazal warned about these things, it must be that you can't know anything about that, and my knowledge is like the threshold of what people can know.
And see that this is all that can be known. And
right, and if Rambam is writing the Moreh Nevuchim, he's deviating from the Torah because he thinks he can explain these things. You know, like that. They're using their own limits as the measure of and standard of human perfection, and anyone who thinks they could go past that must be they're wrong. And when Chazal said that you should be cautious, it meant that you can't get anything there, and it's because I can't get anything there, you know. Right. And I'm confident in this reading of the Rambam because that's what he says about in the three ways people relate to midrashim. That's what he says about group 1 and group 2 both make that mistake, because they use their own intellect as the barometer, as the standard for all knowledge. Do not criticize the terms applied to the intellect in this chapter and others. What? Where's that coming from?
I think it says Kavod Hashem is the intellect.
Oh, okay, thank you. For the purpose here is to guide toward the intended notion and not to investigate the truth of the essence of the intellect. For other chapters are devoted to a precise account of the subject. Okay.
He's being imprecise here, so it'll be like, oh, Rambam, you're wrong here.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on just 1 second here. Yeah. I don't. Maybe this is what you mean, but I don't think he means that he's not being precise. He means that he's not. His goal here is not to explore the validity of those statements. He's just using them. Meaning he is going to say that these are precise terms, but don't be disturbed by them until you understand why they are such. I don't think he's saying he's not being precise. He's saying that this is not a precise account of the subject, but the terms are precise.
Which terms are you talking
about the intellect? Like Zev said, like Kavod Kono. Do not criticize the terms applied to the intellect in this chapter and others. For the purpose here is to guide toward the intended notion, meaning he's using these terms just to get you towards the idea that you were supposed to get, and not to investigate the truth of the essence of the intellect, which he'll do precisely in another chapter. So he's not using imprecise terms, he's just not investigating this topic precisely. Yeah. Again, and he did praise Chazal a lot in that the Kavod Kono thing, like saying that was like a perfect way to say it.
What exactly does he mean when he says the truth of the essence of the intellect?
Like, what is the intellect?
Yeah, I'm saying he's not being precise in an analysis of the subject of the intellect, because that he's going to do that later on.
Yeah.
He's talking about this phenomenon.
Right.
He's just talking about like the product of our intellect.
Yeah, and the limits. Yeah, that's the point of this chapter. Exactly. Yeah.
What to do with it.
Yeah. Okay, 33 is now. That was kind of both prefaces, but now we're getting into why we shouldn't learn metaphysics. Why we can't begin with it. Know that to begin with this science, meaning metaphysics, is very harmful. I mean, the divine science. In the same way, it is also harmful to make clear the meaning of the parables of the prophets and to draw attention to the figurative senses of terms used in addressing people, figurative senses of which the books of prophecy are full. That's interesting. So he's saying two things that are harmful. One is to begin with metaphysics. The second is to clarify the allegories used by the prophets.
Right. To try to like interpret things. Don't try
Yeah.
to interpret things because you're just going to interpret them wrong.
Well, we'll see.
if you
We'll see
start
why.
with trying to
We'll see
interpret
why. Yeah. It behooves rather to educate the young and to give firmness to the deficient in capacity according to the measure of their apprehension. Thus, he who is seen to be perfect in mind and to be formed for that high rank, that is to say, demonstrative speculation and true intellectual inferences, should be elevated step by step, either by someone who directs his attention or by himself, until he achieves his perfection. If, however, he begins with a divine science, it will not be a mere confusion in his beliefs that will befall him, but rather absolute negation. What does footnote 1 say at the bottom? The term, however you say that, used by Maimonides may mean the emptying of the concept of God of all content, the denial of his having any action whatsoever, or so forth. I just want to see what Kafaf uses. I just want to see if he uses like a term like kafira or like something like that. This is chapter 33, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 33, he says that yeah, absolute kafira. Okay, fine.
Yes, it's kind of like what he's talking about here. It's kind of like if you're showing someone like a sci-fi movie and you're explaining what all the special effects are as they're happening, then like it undermines the person's ability to relate to it in like a basic way.
That's an interesting analogy. I like that. Yeah, the Schwartz says bittel gomor, but by bittel he says, yeah. I'm going to go with kafir here for a second, for a while. It may, in my opinion, an analogous case would be like watching a special effects on it would be that of someone feeding a suckling with wheaten bread and meat and giving him wine to drink. That's a bad idea, right? Yeah, he would undoubtedly kill him, not because these ailments are bad or unnatural from them, but because the child that receives them is too weak to digest them, so as to derive benefit from them. Similarly, these true opinions were not hidden, enclosed in riddles, and treated by all men of knowledge with all sorts of artifice through which they could teach them without expounding them explicitly because of something bad hidden in them, or because they undermine the foundations of the Torah, as is thought by ignorant people who deem that they've attained a rank suitable for speculation. Rather, have they been hidden because at the outset the intellect is incapable of receiving them. Only flashes of them are made to appear so that the perfect man should know them. On this account, they are called secrets and mysteries of the Torah, as we shall make clear. Now, I have to say here that he can't mean that anytime the Nevi'im use a mashal, then that is a secret of the Torah. He must mean that there are certain secrets within the Nevi'im that are parables, like the Maaseh Merkavah, that it can't be understood. That's what confused me at first.
Why can't there be a hidden meaning to every?
No, there are hidden meanings to those things, but it can't be that all of them are secrets of the Torah. I just don't think that makes sense, because the Nevi'im use figurative language a lot, and they use mashalim a lot.
And sometimes they even will spell out what it means.
Yeah, right. This is the cause of the fact. This is the cause of the fact that the Torah speaketh in the language of the sons of man, as we have made clear. This is so, meaning in order to prevent you from seeing stuff that could harm your intellect if it's premature. This is so because it is presented in such a manner as to make it possible for the young, the women, and all the people to begin with it and to learn it. Now, it is not within their power to understand these matters as they truly are. Hence, they are confined to accepting tradition with regard to all sound opinions that are of such a sort that it is preferable that they should be pronounced true, and with regard to all representations of this kind. And this is in such a manner that the mind is led toward the existence of the objects of those opinions and representations, but not towards grasping their essence as it truly is. I think the one who said this clear was Rabbi Bachi ibn Pekuda, who we read earlier, that said that the Torah will use figurative, corporeal terms to describe Hashem, and in order to get in your mind the notion that he exists as opposed to not existing. And then once you mature, you can start to strip away the corporeality. But like if you started off with Yesod Yesod Avnei Chachmos Leida Sheshim Matzah Rishon, and you told that to a baby, then there's nothing's going to register in his mind, and he won't have his mind will not be led towards the existence of those objects of these opinions and representations. When, however, a man grows perfect and the mysteries of Torah are communicated to him either by someone else or because he himself discovers them, Again, that's the machlokes between the Ramban and the Rambam. Rambam holds you can discover it by yourself. Ramban would say you can't. Inasmuch as some of them draw his attention to others, he attains a rank at which he pronounces the above-mentioned correct opinions to be true. And in order to arrive at this conclusion, he needs the veritable methods, namely demonstration in cases where demonstration is possible, or strong arguments where this is possible. So then he'll be seeking some sort of verification, right? Whether absolute proof or just strong arguments. In this way, he represents to himself these matters, which had appeared to him as imaginings and parables, in their truth, and understands their essence. And this, again, is what the Rambam does in all of the Moreh Nevuchim up until the chapter we started today. 1 through 30 is he's decoding all of these, allegorical and figurative terms, and what he does later on also. In this way, yeah, I said that already. Accordingly, the following speech of the sages has been repeated to you several times in our speech. The account of the chariot ought not to be taught even to one man, except if he is wise and able to understand it by himself, in which case only the chapter headings may be transmitted to him. On this account, is that a pun? On this account, like account of the chariot, one ought not to begin to teach this subject to anyone unless it be according to his capacity, and then only under these two conditions. One of them being that he is one who is to be taught is wise. The one who is taught is to be, being that the one who is to be taught is wise. I mean that he has achieved knowledge of the science from which the premises of speculation derive. So now he's defining what the term chacham is here.
Right.
He has achieved knowledge of the sciences from which the premises of speculation derive. Okay, I don't even know what that is. I'm clearly not ready, but yeah. And the other, that he be fully understanding, intelligent, sagacious by nature, that he divine a notion, even if it is only very slightly suggested to him in a flash. This is the meaning of the dictum of the sages, able to understand by himself. That's mevin midato. So it sounds like chacham means a certain knowledge, whereas navon is a certain ability of like inference. I shall make clear to you the cause that prevents the instruction of the multitude in the veritable methods of speculation, that prevents their being taught to begin to grasp the essences of things as they are. I shall also explain to you that it is requisite and necessary that this should not be otherwise than thus. These explanations shall be made clear in the chapter following the present one. I shall then say, chapter 34. Yeah, if this was, these were letters, I think, originally. So I wonder if he like wrote that at the end or if he sent both letters at the same time. It's like waiting for the next Harry Potter book to come out. All right, the causes that prevent the commencement of instruction with divine science, the indication of things that ought to be indicated, and the presentation of this to the multitude are 5. Okay, so these are things which prevent you from studying the divine science. The first cause is the difficulty, subtlety, and obscurity of the matter in itself. Thus, Scripture says, that which is far off and exceeding deep, who can find it out? I bet that's Eov. Is that Eov? No, it's Koheles. Okay, and it is said, but wisdom, where shall it be found? Is that Eov?
Yep.
Yes, okay, good. Now it is not fitting in teaching to begin with what is most difficult and obscure for the understanding. Okay, obviously, right? And that's the funny thing about this area is that no one's going to think that you could do calculus before pre-calculus, like if they don't know the subject. Obviously, I think you can actually, but whatever, like in theory. But people do think that you can like understand how God created the world without like, understanding more basic things first. One of the parables generally known in our community is that likening knowledge to water. Now the sages, peace be upon them, explain several notions by means of this parable. One of them being that he who knows how to swim brings up pearls from the bottom of the sea, whereas he who does not know drowns. For this reason, no one should expose himself to the risks of swimming except he who has been trained in learning to swim. It's not a good mashal. A lot of good mashalim today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If only we understood what they meant.
The second cause is the insufficiency of the minds of all men at their beginnings. For man is not granted his ultimate perfection at the outset. For perfection exists in him only potentially, and in his beginnings he lacks this act. Meaning you start off with as a potential mind, blank slate, so to speak. Accordingly, it said, "And man is born a wild ass." that's good in the way we use it also to talk about why certain people shouldn't go into metaphysics. Nor is it necessarily obligatory in the case of every individual who is endowed with something in potency, that this thing should become actual. Meaning, just because you have the potential, and everyone doesn't mean they're going to actualize it. Sometimes it remains in its defective state, either because of certain obstacles or because of paucity of training in what transforms that potentiality into actuality. Accordingly, it is clearly said, not many are wise. The sages too, may their memory be blessed, have said, I saw the people who have attained high rank, and they are very few. They were few. For the obstacles to perfection are very many, and the objects that distract from it abound. When should he be able to achieve the perfect preparation and the leisure required for training, so that what subsists in a particular individual in potency should be transformed into actuality? Yeah, so this is an interesting one. The first one I think is more intuitive. First one is the subject matter is very difficult. Second one is you start off in a state of potentiality, and you like it sounds like the emphasis here is you cannot skip from potentiality to actuality, like except by going through all of the necessary like procedures. So training, discovery of ideas, all that other stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just what I'm thinking about here is like theoretically, if these are 5 causes why people shouldn't go into metaphysics at first, theoretically a person might be on board with one of them and not on board with the other one. I'm just trying to like do permutations in my mind to see what that would look like.
What do you mean?
Meaning like a person might say, let's say for example, they'll realize, okay, I need to go through training, but like this thing isn't, the subject is not really as difficult as people say it is. So that'd be a person who's on board with number 2, but not number 1. And the person who says, okay, it's really, really difficult, but all I have to do is just like, you know, like prepare myself, and it's easy to prepare. Like I just got to become 40 years old because they say if you're 40, you can learn Kabbalah, you know, and like, yeah.
It's like, I'm a really smart person. Like I can do this.
Yeah. Oh, here's actually a real world example, right? So in the question of what is the relationship between the secrets of Torah, Maaseh, Merkavah, Maaseh, Bereishis that Chazal talked about, and then modern day Kabbalah or Hasidus or Zohar or teachings like that, you know? So there's obviously lots of different shitos on it, but I remember reading in the works of, oh man, I forgot which one it is. I have the books at home. One of the Lubavitcher Rebbes was saying how that because we're close to Mashiach, then what used to be difficult is now no longer difficult. Meaning that it's true in the time of Chazal that these things were beyond people's reach, but the closer we get to Mashiach, the more these things will become revealed and accessible to everyone, and Hasidus made it accessible to everyone, you know? Now, so to me, that's a mistake in the second premise here, which is that like they're acknowledging that the subject matter was difficult, but like something about the era we're in, something about like the Baal Shem Tov, something about like, is that we don't have to do the preparations. Like we're good with that, you know? Okay. The third cause lies in the length of the preliminaries. For man has in his nature a desire to seek the ends, and he often finds preliminaries tedious and refuses to engage in them. We know that. Know, however, that if an end could be achieved without the preliminaries that preceded, the latter would not be preliminaries, but pure distractions and futilities, right? Obviously. Now, if you would awaken, I love this line, if you would awaken a man, even though he were the dullest of all people, as one awakens a sleeping individual, and if you were to ask him whether he desired at that moment to have knowledge of the heavenly spheres, namely what their number is and what their configuration and what is contained in them and what the angels are and how the world as a whole was created and what is its end is in the view of the arrangement of its various parts with one another and what the soul is and how it was created in time in the body and whether the human soul can be separated from the body and if it can, in what manner and through what instrument and with what distinction in view. And if you put the same question to him as regard to other subjects of research of this kind, he would undoubtedly answer you in the affirmative. Right? Wake up the guy like, do you want to know the spheres? Do you want to know the angels? He's going to say, yes, I do. He would have.
Everyone would say yes. I think a lot of people would be like, nah, I want to go back to sleep.
Yeah, right. And that person would be better off. He would have a natural desire to know these things as they are in truth. But he would wish this desire to be allayed and the knowledge of all this to be achieved by means of 1 or 2 words that you should say to him. Right? Just tell me the answer, you know? Yeah. And I mean, this is where I got my approach to, this is kind of a side point, but like when, you know, I teach Eov, but like, obviously everyone always wants to know what is the answer to the question, Tzadik V'Ralo and Rasha V'Tovlo, and they will cling to or look for short answers. And what I say is like, if the answer could have been said in a sentence, then you would not need a safer 42 chapters, ascribed to Moshe Rabbeinu with some of the most difficult Hebrew and difficult concepts ever. Like, so by definition, then, if anyone gives you a one sentence answer to that question, by definition, it's false. You know,
Right.
and like that's the mistake here. You know, and there's another point which I don't think the Rambam makes, so I think I have to make this point. That like I think people, when they hear of the secrets of the Torah, like Sodos and Sisrei Torah, I think they relate to it like a secret that you would withhold from someone. Like it's a secret, meaning that the only thing that makes it a secret is that I'm not telling you, but I could just tell you. You know,
Right.
but the way that
It's not a secret for a reason. It just happens to be a secret.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Exactly, and it's being withheld. But let's say like one of the examples that I've heard Rabbi Chaim mention is like the way that Chazal use sod. Sod means it is by nature an obscure idea that not everyone is ready for. And one of the examples he gives is like the sod ha'ibur, which he was saying is like all of the complex calculations that are needed to do leap year stuff, you know. And that's not a secret because like it's being withheld, and that's not even one that people's emotions are attached to. It's just very, very hard stuff to learn, you know. And so that's what makes it secret. Okay. If, however, I like this. Sorry, I interrupted the Rambam's beautiful thing here. If, however, so this guy wants the answer in 1 or 2 words. If, however, you would lay upon him the obligation to abandon his occupation for a week's time, just 1 week, until he should understand all this, he would not do it, but would be satisfied with deceptive imaginings through which his soul would be set at ease. He would also dislike being told that there is a thing whose knowledge requires many premises and a long time for investigation. You know that these matters are mutually connected, there being nothing in what exists besides God, may he be exalted, and the totality of all the things he has made. For this totality, I don't know what is going into this now. For this, yeah.
So just about what we were saying before, that like sod.
Yeah.
Like a good example of something that's like a sod is how like the observation of something affects the outcome.
Yeah.
It's something that people have, I'd say, a lot of like fantasies about what that means, or like, you know.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, you know, speculate about that, but like, it means a certain very specific thing
Right.
that like requires knowledge of how of how science observes particles.
Yeah.
That people don't want to go into.
Yeah.
It, you know?
Yeah. I actually think, since I have to go soon, and this third thing is very, very long, I think we should actually stop here and then pick it up next week. So we should definitely, I assume, be able to finish the more Nebuchim stuff next week and then go back to the Mishnah Torah, unless we get taken elsewhere. Okay. Thanks. See you next week.
Thanks.